Waterboarding. Waterboarding is like the world's worst water park ride, designed by someone who clearly missed the fun memo. Imagine lying flat on your back, not on a comfortable beach towel, but on a cold, hard surface. Instead of getting a gentle sprinkle of water to cool you off, you have a cloth over your face. It sounds like a relaxing massage, but you'll soon change your mind as soon as water is poured over the cloth. This isn't a refreshing splash like you're used to, it's more like someone trying to turn you into a human sponge. The water soaks through the cloth and into your nose and mouth, making you feel like drowning while still on dry land. Even though you know you're not drowning underwater, your body doesn't know that. This triggers a primal panic response from your body that can affect your mind in the worst way possible because it induces psychological distress. The stress on your mind and body tends to be too much that you'd be willing to do or say anything to stop the torture. The method has been condemned internationally because it's cruel and a bit too effective at making people feel miserable. Stress positions. If you're tortured using stress positions, it's like you're in a yoga class where your instructor could be the devil himself because he has no regard for safety and likes seeing you suffer while you're bent like a pretzel. Basically, this torture method was designed to make you miserable without injuring you or leaving visible marks. You get forced into an awkward position that might not be too bad for a few seconds, but can tax your mind and body when you have to hold it for minutes or hours. Imagine being told to hold the plank position, but instead of the usual 30 seconds, you're forced to maintain it for hours. You might leave with rock-hard abs that John Cena would envy, but you'll also be physically and mentally spent because you were pushed past your breaking point. It's not just about physical discomfort, the mental strain is just as intense because your mind can't comprehend why your back is getting bent on a chair like a pretzel for hours. But the tormentor's goal is to break you down, both body and mind, and make you desperate for the pain to stop. Sensory deprivation. Imagine yourself playing a terrifying and unsolvable escape room game, and the room is just pure nothingness. You can't see, hear, or feel anything. It's just you and the sound of your breathing. At first, this might sound like a great opportunity to meditate, but the longer your senses are deprived, your mind will eventually start playing tricks on you. The idea behind this torture method is that removing all sensory input will force your brain to betray you. It's like it makes up its own show because it can't see, hear, or feel anything. The problem is that this show isn't a Netflix hit, but it's more of a terrifying mix of hallucinations, anxiety, and the desperate need for sight and sound. Your brain is like a muscle in the sense that it needs regular exercise to stay strong, but without your senses feeding it information, it can lose its sharpness, similar to how your muscles weaken if you stop lifting weights. The use of sensory deprivation as a torture method has been banned under the Geneva Convention because driving someone to the brink of insanity isn't exactly humane. Sitting in silence and pondering life's mysteries for a few minutes is one thing, but doing it for days is a recipe for losing your wit. Mock executions. Let's say your torturer says that you're on death row and you're going to get executed in a while. He takes you to an electric chair, straps you in, and pulls the switch. Just as you're expecting 1,000,000 volts, nothing happens. The guy just says, "Just kidding," but the damage of this mock execution has already been done. Basically, this torture method involves pretending to kill you to make you freak out. Just as you're about to meet your maker after praying to all the saints and angels so that you'll get to see the pearly gates, you find out that it was a prank all along. This can cause serious psychological distress because it plays with one of humanity's deepest fears, death. There's nothing physically painful about this torture method because it's all mental. It tortures you psychologically and scars you for life by causing long-lasting trauma and symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, including flashbacks, nightmares, and severe anxiety. It also plants the seeds of mistrust in your head, giving you trust issues when it comes to authority figures. Even if you make it out of your torture in one piece, your mind will subconsciously make it harder for you to trust people. In the worst cases, you might even come out emotionally numb, saying whatever to just about anything. That's why governments and organizations around the world have banned mock executions, because it's a violation of human rights. It's basically something that would make the worst movie villains look better. Hotboxing. Imagine yourself in a small car with busted windows. You're with your uncle after he just won a burrito eating contest. All those beans will eventually turn into a fart, filling the car with 10 years worth of gas. Hotboxing is similar, but 10 times worse. While it may sound like the newest workout craze, hotboxing doesn't involve 12 rounds with Mike Tyson in a sauna. Instead, it's a torture method that keeps you confined in a small room while being forced to inhale smoke and other toxic gases. You'd be subjected to a mix of unbearable heat, suffocating air, and smoke inhalation that would make even the most hardened barbecue pitmaster call it quits. Too much smoke can cause respiratory issues, irritation to the eyes, and even make it hard to think clearly. It's not just about physical pain, because the disorientation and panic from being trapped and unable to breathe properly can be incredibly distressing. That makes it a serious violation of human dignity. The reason this method got banned is pretty straightforward. It's incredibly inhumane, because it's right up there with putting someone in a giant microwave. But instead of getting crispy, you get a smoked human. It's not even the most effective torture method. From a practical standpoint, it's also ineffective for extracting reliable information. The discomfort and disorientation caused can lead to false confessions or unreliable information, making it inhumane and inefficient. Forced watching. Forced watching is like having a personal movie all for yourself. But instead of watching a marathon of all the Marvel movies, you're forced to watch every Human Centipede and every The Exorcist movie in what seems to be visual torture. What happens is that you're locked in a room where you're forced to wear blinders like a horse so that you'd only be focusing on a screen in front of you. Your tormentor would be playing disturbing content over and over again as a form of psychological torture. The content can include graphic images, violent scenes, disturbing events, and other grim materials that can cause your face to show every emotion of horror possible. This can go on for hours or days, making it hard for you to sleep. Even if you do end up sleeping, you'd be in a marathon of nightmares that are probably worse than what your tormentors are forcing you to watch. The psychological torment can be immense because this can cause severe emotional trauma, especially if you're quite sensitive to graphic content. This torture aims to break you down, destroying your mental health. So even if it doesn't physically harm you, you'd be left with severe PTSD and anxiety disorders. You'd probably never want to watch a movie ever again, even if it's a Disney princess movie. Rectal feeding. If your friend invites you on a culinary experiment they call reverse dining, you may want to decline because it's not an exotic dinner experience. Instead, it's rectal feeding, a form of torture where food is introduced from the exit rather than the entrance. Your digestive system is pretty specific. It's designed to process food through the mouth, the esophagus, the stomach, and the intestines. When food is introduced in a way it wasn't meant to be, like through the butt, it disrupts this delicate system. This can cause things like infections, severe pain, and even damage to the rectum itself. It's like putting a roller coaster ride backward, where everyone gets sick and confused. Rectal feeding fits this bill of what a gruesome torture should be because it's an invasive procedure that doesn't just make someone uncomfortable, but also risks their health. It's meant to break down a person's resolve and force compliance. That's why it used to be a favorite among tormentors when torturing people going on a hunger strike. It was their way of ensuring that food still goes inside the bodies of hunger strikers, but in a humiliating, degrading, and painful way. This technique is now banned because, aside from being medically dubious, it's downright inhumane. Torture is bad enough, but adding a dash of gross and unnecessary into the mix is a recipe for moral indigestion. It's like someone decided that just making you suffer wasn't enough, because they had to make it weird too. Forced tattooing. Let's say you're about to get a tattoo, but you're not getting one because you want one. Instead, it's a sick tormentor tattooing you. It's not even a design you love, but it's something so humiliating you'd rather burn your skin off. That's what you get with the torture method known as forced tattooing. Forced tattooing is someone using your skin as a canvas without your consent. This can be incredibly painful and invasive, which is why it's considered a form of torture. The process isn't just physically painful, but also deeply demeaning, as it strips you of your control over your body. But what makes it worse is that it's not a good art project. In most cases, forced tattoos are meant to humiliate you by putting different symbols or words on your body. Imagine walking around having a large penis tattooed on your forehead. These tattoos aren't even made by seasoned artists. They're more likely to be a scribble that looks like it was drawn by a toddler who just discovered crayons. And you're stuck with this masterpiece forever. Historically, forced tattooing has been used in brutal ways. For instance, during World War II, the Nazis used it to dehumanize and control concentration camp prisoners. Fortunately, forced tattooing meets the criteria of inhumane and degrading treatment under international law, making it a banned torture method. Overstimulation. Overstimulation isn't a form of sexual kink, but a torture method designed to put your senses into overdrive. Imagine being strapped on a chair and forced to watch Michael Bay's Transformers movies for hours at full brightness and with a headset on max volume. Your tormentor might add flashing lights, blaring sirens, and the smell of popcorn that you can never eat. That's overstimulation in a nutshell. When you're overstimulated, your brain is basically juggling knives while unicycling on a tightrope over a pit of crocodiles. Yes, there's too much going on, and that's exactly what the brain feels in this situation. It can't handle all that mess, and will eventually break down. Your nervous system gets bombarded with more information than it can process when your senses are on overdrive. It's like how you break down when your boss keeps giving you more work than your job description can handle. This can lead to severe stress, anxiety, and even psychological trauma. Over time, it can cause lasting damage to mental health, leading to conditions like PTSD and chronic anxiety disorders. The body and mind are deeply interconnected, so if one is distressed, the other can suffer. That's why overstimulation can lead to physiological effects such as increased heart rate, sweating, and even the risk of collapse. Luckily, overstimulation is banned under the Geneva Convention. If it was still legal, governments would replace investigation rooms with movie theaters. Not having enough subscribers feels like torture, but you can help us feel better by subscribing to our channel and joining our Discord. Chemical torture. Being chemically tortured is like being forced to drink the worst cocktail in the shadiest bar in the world. This drink inflicts pain, disorients you, and makes you psychologically submissive. Sooner or later, you'd confess every sin you committed since you were in your mother's belly. Chemical torture methods vary, but they often involve administering drugs that induce severe pain, hallucinations, or a complete loss of control over your mind and body. Think of it as your worst hangover, but with none of the fun memories from the night before. One common method is the use of truth serums. These drugs are supposed to lower shyness and compel you to speak the truth. But instead of the lighthearted revelations you might blurt out after a few drinks, this cocktail has you confessing your innermost thoughts under extreme duress. But these drugs often don't even work as intended, leading to confused ramblings that would make even your most bizarre sleep talk sound clear. In some cases, chemical torture might involve nasty agents like mustard gas, which isn't the kind you slather on a hot dog. This stuff causes burning, blisters, and other symptoms that make you feel like you've been stung by thousands of jellyfish. It makes your skin feel on fire, or even messes with your nervous system and makes you twitch like you're in a weird rave. It's not just that bad lab experiment you had in your 9th grade chemistry classes, but an actual horrific act that can leave physical and mental scars. No wonder it's been banned by most countries worldwide. Forced feeding. Forced feeding isn't a trip to your grandma's house where she just can't take no for an answer, even when you're already stuffed with cake and cookies. It's more like a dinner party where you must choose something every second. This torture method was usually reserved for hunger strikers, as dictators and tyrants broke their will. It's like you're inviting your friend to a massive buffet seconds after he said he was going on a strict diet. Except for hunger strikers, the diet is their choice to refuse food for a political cause. You're rubbing salt in the wound by making them go against their moral and political beliefs. If you were tortured this way, you'd get strapped down as your tormentor shoves a tube down your throat. This tube would then carry food directly into your stomach, like liquid porridge or some other unappetizing slush. The process was often painful, degrading, and humiliating, turning the personal choice of eating into a public spectacle of suffering. It can also affect your mental health, traumatizing you at the sight of a grain of rice, because you always remember the time food got shoved into your gut against your will to break your spirit. This method has been widely condemned and deemed inhumane. Right now, the only forced feeding you'll get is when your grandma won't let you leave her house without a full belly. Cultural and religious humiliation. Let's say your favorite food is pizza, but someone forces you to watch them put pineapple, anchovies, and chocolate syrup on it while insisting it's the only way to eat pizza. You'd probably be horrified. Now magnify that horror by about 1,000 and you're getting close to how victims of cultural and religious humiliation feel. This torture method involves attacking the core beliefs and identity of an individual, often by desecrating sacred objects, mocking religious practices, or forcing someone to violate their cultural norms. It's like they take everything you cherish, wrap it in duct tape, and throw it into a volcano. And the torturers do this as if they didn't go through sensitivity training at work. For example, a devout follower of a religion might be forced to defile a holy text or engage in acts that are strictly forbidden by their faith, such as a Muslim forced to eat bacon. The goal here isn't just physical pain, but emotional and psychological anguish. It's the ultimate way of ruining your sense of self, because your beliefs and values form part of your identity. But cultural and religious humiliation either became obsolete or banned. Tormentors realized that those methods could also strengthen the determination of the person tortured. Meanwhile, international law has declared that this cruel and degrading treatment could get tormentors in trouble with the UN.